Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Pharma Connect webinar. My name is Ellie Sika, and I'm excited to welcome you today to Going Beyond the Video Call, how to position your life science team to work faster, smarter, and more strategically. First, I'll cover some quick housekeeping items. If you've experienced difficulties with audio or advancing slides, please refresh your screen with F5. If you are experiencing other issues, hit the question mark button to receive assistance. At any time during this presentation, submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. In 24 hours, you will receive a link to watch the recording of this session. Thank you all for joining us today. I will now hand it over to Lance Hill from Within3 to begin the presentation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and welcome, everyone. Hopefully, we're going to have an exciting discussion today. We've got a really great panel, a very interesting topic, and we're excited to speak with you. As was mentioned, if there's any questions along the way, please feel free to add them into the panel. We may hit some of them as we go. We may hit some of them at the end, but we're always interested in making it interactive. I think what you'll see today is our panel represents a pretty broad swath of the industry, and so that's hopefully will make some interesting perspective and discussion. And so today's call is around going beyond the video call. It's around how do we, in a virtual technology sort of world, or a world that may be some virtual and some live, depending on where you are in the world and what time it is going forward, how do you become more effective? And so everyone on the panel today has some experience with that and is willing to share, and that hopefully will be very interesting. In terms of the agenda for today, we're going to go ahead and introduce the panel first, and then I'm going to give a brief virtual technology intro, just so that everyone's on the same page when we use the word like virtual technology. What do we mean exactly? What types of virtual technologies are we talking about? Because I find that sometimes in having these sorts of sessions, one person has in their head, we mean Zoom, someone else has in their head, we mean, something very, very different. And so this will kind of set some baseline. And then really the bulk of it is going to be in a panel discussion. I'll be moderating and kind of teeing up some questions for the panel to talk about their experiences on this topic. And then we'll have Q&A and wrap up. So again, thank you so much for coming and looking forward to the talk. So let's go ahead and start with our panel. I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll kind of go in order around the line. So I'm Lance Hill. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Within3, and I'll talk a little bit about what Within3 is and does. But at a high level, what we are is a company that builds solutions to help organizations communicate more effectively, gain better insights, be more actionable, and engage physicians, patients, payers better, faster, and more effectively. And we've been doing that for quite a while. The company was founded in 2008. And at this point, we work with 39 of the top 50 pharmaceutical companies, including all 20 of the top 20. We work with a whole host of small and mid-sized biotech, med device, med tech, med diagnostic, pretty much across the life sciences arena, big to small, and also globally. And so we have a lot of experience with this topic. And in my background personally is I'm a technologist. So when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to grow up and code video games. I thought that would be my future calling. And as I got older, that didn't work out. And so now I'm on the business side of things, and my technology capability vastly is lower than that of my children. But that's okay. I'm doing my best. So that's a little bit about me. Maybe we can go around and start maybe left to right. Mary, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Lance, and thanks everyone for attending today and for inviting me to be on this panel. My name is Mary Murray, and I am the Vice President of Collaborative Action Networks at the National Minority Quality Forum. We are a nonprofit focused on improving health and health equity through research, advocacy, and education. And in my particular role, we invest in data, Medicare and Medicaid claims data, and so I work with multiple stakeholders, industry sponsors like pharmaceutical companies or device manufacturers, patient advocacy groups, academic researchers, to really uncover what are best practices for improving health equity across different disease areas like cancer or lupus. And then really identify actions and operations that we can do together. So we work together to identify the issues, and then we work together to identify and create the solutions. That's that.
All right, thank you. Christian.
Again, thank you very much for having me. Nice to virtually meet everybody, and thank you for attending. My name is Christian Meyer. I'm the Senior Director and Head of Sales at Achille Interactive. We are a digital therapeutics company located in Boston and San Francisco with a product relatively recently approved. I've had about 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, wearing just about every commercial hat, from carrying a bag as a sales rep to a sales manager, all the way up with commercial marketing, marketing operations, et cetera. And I've had some great experience with the Within3 platform so far, especially here at Achille, and I'm excited to talk about it. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Nicole.
Yeah, thank you also for having me, and welcome everyone. My name is Nicole Lowe. I am the Women's Cancer MSL West Regional Director for AstraZeneca, a giant mouthful to tell you that I lead a team of medical science liaisons whose job it is to engage with leaders in the oncology space for AstraZeneca. I will say, although I'm here, I'm a proud member of AstraZeneca. I don't represent their views today. These are my own views. My previous experience is all in pretty much big pharma. I'm a bench scientist by training, and I've been in medical affairs for about 15 years in various roles, strategy and field-based. So I'm super happy to be here and share my experience.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I think what we have here is kind of the full end of the spectrum. We have AstraZeneca on the one hand. We have Achille, which is a medical therapeutics kind of recently approved innovative sort of company, and then we have NMFQ, which is a nonprofit focused on population health and health disparity in minority populations, all touching different parts, but all affected by the travel restrictions with the pandemic, all looking to try to determine what's the right mix of technologies to have the best results for what we do. And that's kind of the point of the discussion today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give a primer of what we mean by virtual technology and what we're talking about, and maybe more importantly, what we're not today. And that'll, I think, serve as a good baseline. And then we'll just jump into a series of questions that we have for the panel. And so the first thing I want to do is level set the different kind of major styles of virtual technology. So when we're talking about virtual technology, we're talking about ways that people can have two-way dialogue. We're not talking about the type of technology where maybe it's pushing a video clip to someone and it's one way. Really what we're talking about in the panel today is how do you engage in bidirectional dialogue to gather insights, to have discussion, share ideas, review information, work on projects together, things of that nature. So really the group back and forth dialogue is what we mean, not kind of the how do I detail a physician on the commercial side of the business, that sort of thing. And so in the group dialogue, there's really two main flavors of virtual technology. The first one is real-time virtual meetings like we're having right now. So a real-time virtual meeting, whether it's a live meeting or whether it's a video conference, is everyone has to be available at the same time and at the same place, whether it's the same hotel or whether it's on the same video camera screen. And that is by far, when people hear virtual meeting or virtual conference or virtual technology, that's typically what people think of out of the gate. I think we are all completely familiar with these sorts of technologies at this point, given especially the last 18 months. I'm sure we all spend more time on web camera screens than we would have ever thought would be possible in our lives, but yet here we are. And that type of interaction has gone from maybe being viewed as a lesser way to do a live meeting to there are places where that really is potentially better and more effective, or at least more cost efficient than pure travel, that sort of mindset. However, the real-time meeting has a lot of drawbacks. that make it difficult to conduct some sorts of work. So, so for example, especially the larger the group gets. So the larger the group gets, it can be really hard to schedule with logistics, everyone available at this time, at this call, everyone's, read the pre-materials, everyone's not multitasking and looking around and thinking about something different. It can be very difficult. For example, let's say you're doing something like an advisory board and you have 10 physicians on the call and it's an hour. At maximum efficiency, you're only getting 6 minutes of discussion from each one. And yet you have everyone kind of wrapped up for an hour. So video conferences for that two-way dialogue are really, really effective, but become less so the bigger the group gets, or the more detailed the information gets, or the more disparate the groups that the participants get. But however, this sort of interaction is very, very solidly used and ubiquitous. The other flavor is an overtime meeting. And this is really what Within3's platform is industry leader in. We do thousands and thousands and thousands of these sorts of interactions every quarter. What this is think of it more like an online university approach to collaboration, where instead of everyone showing up on a video call like we are right now, a virtual room is opened up, questions and content are added, things can be viewed, and people can log in on their own time and talk, interact, etc. And all the output is consolidated into very usable format. So it overcomes a lot of the obstacles with the live or video conference sort of meeting, because it removes all of those sorts of logistics. And it's also very, very more effective for deeper, more detailed dialogue. So a very quick overview of just what some of the main capabilities of that sort of platform are. One is it's a place where think of it like discussion threads like you might have on social media, but they're highly structured. You can tag people, reply to people, notify people, ask questions, ask follow-ups, have dialogue across a whole variety of different topics, all very, very structured around a set of work. Those can be qualitative, quantitative, ranking, voting, choose all that apply. What do you think about this? Should we go left? Should we go right? All of those things are very easy to do in that sort of environment. They're also, these tools have a lot of functionality around documents. So think of it like, I'm sure everyone's familiar with like Office 365 or something like that, where people can kind of sort of see a spreadsheet at the same time, or maybe make some comments on a Word document. These tools have those sorts of functionality kind of to the next level, where you can have very deep, very contextual discussions within documents, about documents, authoring documents, et cetera, but it really brings that sort of interaction to a very managed next level. And then they offer a lot of other features as well that really make life easier, from language translation, automatically translating hundreds of languages between each other, doing medical dictation, voice to text, AI analysis on the outputs and things like that, that allow you to kind of more quickly understand what's gone on, what the output of the interaction was. So that's a very quick view of like what some of the technologies involved with these overtime platforms are. And at the end of the day, what you see is, depending on what you're doing, especially for the larger groups, it overcomes a lot of the issues that you might have trying to do a video cast. Again, the larger the group, the harder the logistics. The larger the group, the harder it is to get full participation, the harder it is to get kind of full engagement, interaction back. One person's not dominating the discussion. And you can go deeper and deeper and deeper on dialogue and not run out of time. And so there's a place where the video conference fits really well. You're not going to do an online discussion platform for a staff meeting. There's a place where online discussion platforms fit really well. And then there's obviously a place where live meetings fit very well. And part of what we really want to talk about today is what are the places on the panelists, how they think about these different styles of interaction, where they use them, where they don't, what they see going forward, and so forth. So with that, I am done with my primer, and I am going to bring up the first overall question. I'd love to kind of go around, and I'll do it kind of in the order of who's on my Brady Bunch screen. But the first question is, obviously, travel restrictions were a sea change in how we all operate. I would love to know from each of you, for your organizations, what life was like prior to the travel restrictions from the pandemic, how things maybe change and how you think about using technology to communicate to do what you need to do, and then what you see happening afterwards, how you think things are going to be in 2022 or 3, whenever life is wonderful again. Are we going back to 2019 and operating like it was then? Are we doing something different? So, maybe starting with Mary, maybe talk to us about your thoughts over the last couple of years and how you see it going forward.
Sure. So it's an interesting question for me in particular, because I just started in this particular role exactly a year ago. And before that, I was in a pharma role similar to Nicole's. So really different environments to be working in. And when I came into this role, I honestly, I haven't even met my teammates in person yet. I've been working with them a year, but with COVID, I joined right around the time when COVID was starting to hit and have like big impacts. And so, I've worked virtually just internally with my team there. And when I joined and got the job that I have, the Collaborative Action Networks, it became clear over those sort of couple of months of settling in that we were going to need to run advisory boards, multi-stakeholder advisory boards with patients and patient advocates and clinicians and academic researchers. And I thought, gee, how am I going to do that? And it just happened that around that same time, I was invited to be an advisor by a client company, and they were using this Within3 platform. And I'm not particularly gifted with technology, let's say. And so I was like, well, okay, I'll try this out. But I found it to be such a great experience and really so impactful, the way I was able to communicate with the other advisors and kind of ask them questions. They were able to ask me questions. We were all able to respond to questions that were already, programmed in. That as soon as that experience was over, I contacted Within3 and said, could you help us out? And so since that time, we've done now, I think, 4 different advisory boards, and we've done another type of interaction on the platform for a document collaboration for a manuscript. So, I'm not saying, I'm not sure I'm answering the question about what was most challenging, because for me, this platform enabled me in this new role to get the job done. So I hope that's helpful.
No, absolutely. And where do you see it headed? Where do you see, when travel restrictions lift, how do you see the role of these sorts of technologies going forward?
Yeah, and I mean, for us, we're a small organization, right? So being able to do this work on a virtual platform and with the support of the Within3 team, it just makes us able to produce, I think, at a level that otherwise I think we'd need many more headcount, to deliver. And, I just compare it to when I was in a larger organization and we would have in-person advisory boards, just the amount of effort to recruiting the advisors and then getting everybody to be, as you had mentioned earlier, in the same place at the same time, particularly, again, when it was patients, kind of managing the physical accommodations, that might be needed. And then we'd run the actual advisory board, and we'd have, the participants in the advisory board there in the room, but then we'd also have support folks. We'd have 2 people taking notes so that we could get a good transcript, at the end of it, and then collating, waiting for the transcript and then collating all of that information, et cetera. I can't see going, in my organization now, we couldn't do that type of activity. This really helps us, and we've got the transcripts and everything all done. As soon as the session shuts, you've got a transcript to work with. So, so that's where I think this is going. We still do some live webinars. We found that a hybrid method helps, that we kick off any given project with a live, meeting. Sometimes we do have to schedule 2 of those to accommodate all the advisors. But that way we're sure everybody's registered on the platform. Then they start to engage for 1 or 2 weeks. And then we close the session, and then we bring everybody back a week or so later after we've had a chance to process everything. and just explore some of those themes. And then we close that, and then we go forward to develop our recommendations based on that interaction. So I find that hybrid of two virtual modalities working for us, but I don't see an enormous need for an in-person for that type of work right now for us.
That's great, thank you. So Nicole, so very large organization, maybe other side of the spectrum. Your role, you manage MSLs, and so talk about a role that is incredibly impacted when travel is no longer possible. How have you survived that? What does the last 24 months look like for you in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely has changed everything about what we do. When the pandemic initially hit, actually, we pivoted to virtual really quickly, but we learned very quickly too that everybody pivoted to virtual, and that the HCPs that we were trying to reach out to weren't really ready for that. And so we actually took one giant step back. For a couple months, we said, let's be reactive. Let's figure out what we're doing here. Let's take it slow and have our customer in mind first. So we slowly kind of got back out there and started embracing virtual face-to-face interactions. But what we found through the course of that is that some of our customers, some of our HCPs, especially like our community physicians who have really high volume practices, who maybe we could go in and see them in their office, they weren't open to a video call. It just didn't fit in their really busy days. So we had to start thinking about what else can we do to engage these folks. And Within3 was one of the tools that we used to do that, to get a bunch of them together to share their insights. But because the Within3 platform allows them to do it over time and, at their leisure, when they get home or when they have a few minutes and they don't have to be on a webinar with an MSL, it was the ideal situation. We actually set some of our meetings up as MSLs were the moderators, so they were able to actually have some scientific exchange with those community physicians. They weren't able to get on to the calls and get those insights. So really leveraging a unique platform to try to engage in a virtual way. I would say that over the course of the pandemic, most of our customers have gotten more comfortable with virtual ways of engaging, both face-to-face and sort of the Within3 types of platforms, which is fabulous because they're much more open to it. They're much more engaged, right? We're having an easier time. They're even savvier with the technology, which everyone was forced to change. So that's been really great. And I think looking forward for us, we have to think about an omni-channel approach to our HCPs. We can't just go out and knock on their door and expect that they're going to want to see us. We have to integrate virtual. We have to integrate things like Within3 and other platforms and other ways of getting their insights and also providing them medical education. So I think there's exciting things to come. And there's so many benefits really for all of us. As a field-based medical team, we get to be home a little bit more. There's some really good things going on here. So that's kind of my high level view.
So how did you, I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, I would guess there was some skeptics that the approach you outlined was going to work. Let's have a bunch of physicians come into kind of an online platform in the sky over a week or two and engage with us. Did you have to do any work, or what were some of the conversations internally as you were thinking about that approach?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit because I used Within3 in a previous role as a medical director for another company. So I had already experienced the great things. So yes, I had to do a lot of nope, it's going to be great. I think people bought into the idea of how to of what we would get out of it pretty quickly, but there were definitely maybe some compliance hurdles and a lot of conversation and stakeholder management along those lines that had to occur because it's a totally different way of working. It's not traditional advisory board. You're going to have them for 5 hours. You're going to pay them for 5 hours. You're going to send them home. It's a very different model. So that's definitely required a lot of extra footwork and taught some lessons, I think.
Well, thank you. And so Christian, maybe you could talk a little bit about what life has looked like for you as travel restrictions hit your business, and maybe even a little bit about what some of the engagement is around your business as well, for those maybe not familiar with digital therapeutics.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I looked at the slide the first time, the word engagement jumped out at me, and obviously the question of the most challenging aspects of it is the engagement itself. Obviously, in sales, we're trying to engage with physicians who are challenged not only with their day-to-day and obviously seeing patients in this ever-changing environment, but making sure that they do so safely for themselves. The days of the representative knocking on the door and seeing the doctor when and where they want to are certainly paused, if not put on hold for a significant period of time. So we've had a lot of challenges with that, just overall engaging with our doctors. But again, as some of the panelists have mentioned, we've been rather surprised, and I think you asked about skepticism. I was certainly a skeptic before. We've been very surprised how quickly a lot of these physicians have really taken to understanding technology, not only the Zooms, obviously, and obviously the telehealth and telemedicine, but with the Within3 platform. I was a little bit skeptical that, here we are selling a digital therapeutic. It's hard enough for them to understand that and, how that works and the technology and the science and all of that in a video game. Oh, by the way, when you become an advisor, we're going to put you on a panel and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. I expected them to really be overwhelmed and really be a little bit turned off, but it was actually quite the opposite. They were very involved, very interested, very excited about a new opportunity. And certainly, as mentioned by the other panelists, in the past, an advisory board or a speaker training or whatever would be a huge undertaking, not only financially, but with travel and arrangements and, quite frankly, a roll of the dice. You bring a lot of these advisors there that you hope work out, and sometimes they don't. Whereas within the Within3 platform, you get their engagement. What I think is most impactful to us is that you get their engagement when they're ready and willing to be engaged. So they're not busy, they're not on the phone. They could, we actually were reviewing some of the recent participation in our program, and it was amazing how some doctors went in and were totally dialed in for 2 hours. One visit, 60 minutes, 120 minutes. Other doctors went in 10 times for 5 minutes each. That really accommodates their style, which again, putting someone in a speaker training or an advisory board for 2 hours in one chair in one location, you're going to get a mixed bag. And, at Achille, we're a small, lean, mean startup. So any platform or any partner or any help that we can get to kind of fill the role of other positions that certainly would have be present in much larger companies, we are all arms for that.
Yeah, so there's interesting that I think you all touched on a little bit on physicians or patients, the kind of the audiences that you speak with, the key stakeholders that you speak with. And you mentioned, I think it was, I forget if it was Nicole or Mary, I'm sorry which, but mentioned about how when things suddenly shifted to virtual, suddenly all the physicians were also suddenly switched to virtual and trying to figure out how to manage that in their calendars. I can see, certainly here in the U.S. For the domestic market, our country's opening up. That's not the case elsewhere in the world, obviously. But at least right now, things are starting to open up for the summer. And I think I could see a swing almost back to the other side, which is suddenly everybody wants to try to get folks to a live meeting sometime between September and December 15th. And there's maybe a lot of contention or constraint around the availability of folks, mixing in their personal travel with their professional travel. What do you guys see when you look in the crystal ball with regard to physician preferences as an example and participating with industry going forward?
Lance, I would say that there is some appetite for face-to-face. I think people are craving just to have some face time, right? But I think things like Within3 are not going away. So, as I referenced earlier, I think we're going to see more of a hybrid model where we can use, it's such a great platform. You get so much insight and so many great things from it in such a short period of time, and it's so easy for everyone. you can't substitute that with all of what's involved in getting together for a face-to-face meeting. So I see our teams going back to a hybrid kind of model, still really leveraging these great new technologies that we've adopted, but there's always place for some face-to-face and having that, human connection and that bonding time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's funny. Some of it's geographically situated, but some of the doctors that we're calling on won't engage virtually anymore. They require that in the case the sales representative or whoever goes in person, because as Nicole mentioned, that people crave that. People want that face-to-face interaction. They want that ability to see people. But certainly the platform, this platform was very effective and needed even prior to COVID. So obviously, the challenges that we faced recently have brought the benefits to light. But, fast forward 6 months when hopefully this whole COVID thing is behind us, I know our team will still use this just because like I mentioned previously, it's just really, really focuses on engagement when doctors and all participants, I know patients, everybody can do it when they're available, which is key.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I would echo that. I think that people are going to be a lot choosier about their travel. It's not just travel. It's not just sort of going from total lockdown to travel. People are also coming back to the office, and they're coming back to the office at different, stages as well. And so to me, travel is kind of a next phase after that. And so I think that this just represents an ability to continue work, right, without interruption. And so people will be thoughtful, I think, about the travel opportunities that they have, because they'll be weighing the benefits of continuous work versus interrupted, work. Which travel represents. It really represents a couple of days, interruption to everything else you're doing.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch to the next question, and this is going to be a little bit all over the place because we've touched on a lot of things already. So some parts of these questions we may already have talked about. But so imagine that you've never used an asynchronous platform before, and you were trying to give advice to maybe a peer organization like yours on what to do and what not to do. What have you learned in that journey? I'd love maybe Christian, starting with you. What advice would you give to someone on the commercial side at a peer organization as they're thinking about, should I use these technologies? Should I just stick with Zoom? Should I, how should I think about it?
Yeah, it's a great point. In the digital therapeutics space that we live in at Achille, we love data. So we love any type of data that we can get our hands on. Especially in regards to engagement and especially in regards to just overall analytics. And again, the Within3 platform does that certainly better than a live meeting. Again, you fill out the surveys at the end of a live meeting of a speaker program or whatnot. We've all seen it before, and everybody said, that was great, that was great, that was great. They all loved it. Meanwhile, half of them weren't very engaged. Whereas with this platform, their engagement is right there. How long they've been on certain questions, what the feedback was, how long it took to answer that question. And I also like how they can, kind of stoke the fire. I love when, the moderator can kind of go in and a doctor mentions something and they may disagree with that. They may, probe a little bit with that. Why don't you explain that to the group a little bit more? Which again, in a larger setting may come off a little bit uncomfortable, but in this platform, you have that tremendous opportunity. And like I said, the data that you get from it that you didn't really think you needed and you didn't really think was so important actually is. And again, I mentioned this before, we reviewed our most recent panel just yesterday, and some of the data that was in there, I never would have thought I'd appreciate, but it was great.
So Mary, what about on your side? So you're, you grabbed the new virtual technology and you started working with stakeholders who maybe had never worked with your foundation before, and asked them to adopt this technology. What learnings did you have? What did did things to overcome? Advice you would give to other groups trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, well, I guess a couple of lessons. some of the advisory boards we do on our own, and then that tends to be inviting advisors that we are familiar with or who are familiar, with our organization. But often we're also doing it in partnership with an advocacy group and like a patient advocacy group. And so, the advisors are familiar with that group. So there's kind of a trust, right, that translates, okay, well, if this group is doing it and this group's inviting me, then, I'm going to do it. It's going to be a good experience. And so I think that's an important learning that you think of it just as a transactional platform, right? To have an interaction and it's somewhat transactional, but actually I think it strengthens our networks, right? It allows us to have more opportunities to build trust through our other partners. And that was a big learning, I think, for me this year, using it in these different ways. And I think also the idea of once someone's invited in, the kind of worry about will they accept it. We have found, I think, in that hybrid way that I described, that when you do that kickoff meeting and you kind of bring everyone together to say, okay, here's our objectives and here's how we're going to go about doing it. And here's the platform. And let's get everyone registered. Sometimes it's that registration step where you see a hang up because folks are afraid. I don't know what they're afraid of, but I know I'm always afraid. What if I do it wrong? I don't know what could happen, but whatever the fear, it's a little bit of a hurdle. But when you can register right there in the kickoff meeting with everybody else and get your questions answered, and you leave that meeting registered and understanding what your role is and ready to go, then we see the engagement very, very quickly after that. And it does help for us to have the metrics afterwards that we can see what were the different times when people were actively engaged. And the other thing that is insightful for us is which questions got the most engagement. I mean, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but in one of our advisory boards, the question that got the most engagement was the one we ask at the end of every one, which is, what haven't we asked you that is really important for us to know? And so somehow that got a huge amount of engagement, meaning maybe our other questions weren't as on the mark, but it was very, very helpful to see how deep this, advisor experience was, and how deep what we need to know is, because we wouldn't obviously have been able to anticipate all of those things. So, I think those are our biggest learnings.
So Nicole, what about you? Imagine I'm your peer at another company and I've not embarked on this journey. I'm doing video casts today. What have you learned that would be helpful to teach me as I think about doing something like this?
Yeah, I think a nuanced lens that we've learned and that we're trying to optimize is how to get people to maximize their engagement with the platform, right? So I think we learned that if the advisors know each other a little bit, they're more likely to kind of go back and forth, which gives us richer content. So, choosing the right advisors to combine together is an important aspect. I think another element to that too is the moderator. How engaged is the moderator? How much follow-up are they doing? That's another way to get people really to spend the time on the platform to follow up on the follow-ups, which for us was really great. And part of that too is, how do you phrase the question? How do you really hone in on the right language to get the insight that you need? Because when you're live, you can kind of rephrase your question to get to where you want to go. But when you do it like this, you don't have another chance as much to rephrase, right? So it's just like some little tweaks, I think, that we're learning along the way that I would share to try to get somebody off on the even better foot than you guys would get them off on.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, that hybrid approach of having the video cast so people can say, hi, I'm Lance and I'm going to be on the panel. We all got a chance to meet each other prior to this panel. And so it's not like, who are these people and, what do their voices sound like and so forth. That can be really, really invaluable. And that speaks to kind of what I was saying before, is using a video conference for that sort of interaction is a great use of the technology. Using it to then try to have all 10 or 12 or 14 people chiming in at once to tell you what you need to learn may not be. And so, what we see a lot is companies, they just look at it as like tools in their tool bag, right? I used to have the live meeting. Somewhere along the way, I added the video conference to my tool bag, and then the pandemic hit and the video conference became most of my tool bag, perhaps. And then this is something else in the tool bag, and understanding, mixing and matching these technologies, when they can work. So I guess a question on, I think several of you have talked about what to do with the results and the insights that you get from these sorts of engagements. Christian, maybe you could expand a little bit. You mentioned, here's some of the data that you get. Why is it useful? Why is that data that maybe the difference between what you might get in a live sort of interaction versus a platform like this? How do you get value from that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think one of the most beneficial things for us from a commercial standpoint is, getting feedback from doctors, and I mentioned this earlier, when they're most available, when they want to chime in, and on things that they're interested in. Participation of every question to the nth degree is not required. So it really shows us too, some of the data of who responded most to what questions for how long and what did they say. If there's kind of bland feedback or maybe not a lot of comments on a particular set of marketing phrasing or copy or imagery or whatnot, that tells us a lot that doctors are kind of to that particular section of a marketing campaign. Whereas if there's a lot of attention to it, even if it was negative, even if it was critical, even if it was something that they were commenting on that we should change or we should alter, the amount of attention to certain things is fantastic. And again, that all gets back to doctors doing this when they're most most available, and it's most convenient to them. And again, it's kind of a compounding effect of once you start to use the platform and once you start to get feedback, it's almost like part of the marketing campaign gauntlet that everything needs to go through, whether it's through creative and copy, and then we get it through our PRC MLR review, and then we have our advisory board within 3 weigh in on it, and then et cetera. It's kind of the assembly line, if you will. Once you get used to that type of feedback from the doctors, it almost becomes like a required step in your process.
So Nicole, how do you think about kind of the relative output you touched on a little bit earlier, and what's interesting or useful with the types of output you might get from one sort of venue versus the other, and how easy it is to work with?
Yeah, for sure. I think someone else mentioned it, but there's a transcript that you get to download right as soon as the meeting's done, which, compared to either having a recording that's then transcribed or paying a couple of people to come and take notes, it's just so easy, and the information's right there and searchable, and it's so easy to organize and digest. I can't say enough good things about that. We've also used the platform to ask sort of multiple choice questions, and over the course of multiple rooms with the same question, we have 40 people worth of data that we can then take back and look at and think about. So there's so many ways to use it, and the output is so clean and so easy to work with. It's fantastic.
So Mary, what about on your side? So you run different types of meetings. They produce different amount of information, different formats. How do you think about that question?
Right, and I actually think of it also from the point of view of what do our stakeholders need from it as well. So often after we do an advisory board, then we go back to our partner. Maybe it's a sponsor, maybe it's like a patient advocacy partner or something like that, and we collate sort of all of that, or we go through all of those findings together. And we see, okay, well, who needs what, for each individual next step. And sometimes for a next step, you need to get buy-in, in your organization. So there's a way to go through the transcript and build out the findings in a way that can be oriented towards that objective. And sometimes, like in my case, I might be looking for information that's going to help me mine the data that I have available to me better, so that I can build a better picture of what does someone experience who's living with, the particular condition, that we're studying. And then sometimes we have, content in there that's useful for just communications content to help us with more external patient engagement or external awareness about what this experience of this disease is for this population. And then we can find ways to use that content in external communications. So it surprises you sometimes when you're going through the transcripts to see the multiple uses for it. It's kind of enduring and can be applied in different ways. And I think one of the best ways is that I can really isolate things for verbatims. You know, if I'll give you an example where, you know, in the advisory board, we were asking about a particular condition, and in that condition, people experience, you know, neuropathy. And so from the clinicians that were answering that question, they gave very clinical descriptions, you know, of neuropathy. But the patient advocate in there said, you know, I can't feel my feet. I can't drive myself to work. I can't, you know, walk without fear of falling. And so to have a verbatim like that, sorry, I don't know, things make me emotional, but to have a verbatim like that, that really helps you to convey what someone with this, what it means for someone with this condition, to have it and to have to live with it. It's invaluable. And we wouldn't necessarily get that if we just had 90 minutes, you know, with the group, like you said. We've got this time to kind of keep probing, and then these nuggets come out that are really powerful.
So building on that a little bit, I want to touch on, and I'll just kind of switch to another question. And again, we've been kind of bouncing around the questions that we have for today before we get to a couple of the ones from the audience. But you work with both patients and physicians. We've talked a lot about physicians, but how are patients reacting to these technologies, and what do you see the future there being?
So that one's back to me again?
Yeah, start with you, Mary. I'm sorry. Just expand on maybe that dichotomy. Mm-hmm.
No, like I said, I just, for us as a small organization, I think this is really a permanent part of our capability. Like, we can really bring this as a capability that we have for building consensus and engaging these, you know, diverse audiences and diverse stakeholders. And I think I had mentioned earlier, for patients in particular, you know, you never know what someone is going to experience it with a condition and when they're going to experience it. Sometimes people have, you know, what you might consider a hidden condition, and if you just looked at them, you wouldn't know kind of what they're living with. But maybe that condition makes it hard for them to travel. Maybe part of that condition is a level of fatigue that makes it difficult to participate in an all-day workshop. I know I've been in in-person advisory groups where part of the condition means that people's body temperature is too low. So we had to have blankets available just in case people got too cold in the room, because, you know, you can't control the facility, you know, temperature that easily, you know, necessarily. So I think it really does make you more thoughtful about the physical demands of an in-person advisory group on people, and so it makes you more able to engage a population that might otherwise be harder to engage because of the physical demands of the experience of contributing to an advisory board. Here, people can do it when they can do it in their home environment or their own environment where they're most comfortable.
So maybe, Nicole, on your side around the future, and maybe think about the industry generally, maybe not your company in particular, but the industry generally. Sometimes we hear, but the person up on high is, you know, an MD from 30 years ago, and, you know, if they could go back and dig the fax machine out of the trash and walk around with that, they would be doing that if they could, all the way to, nope, we're sold. You know, this is the future and we're jumping in with both feet. How do you think industry reacts over time, maybe as travel restrictions lower? I know the idea is that there'll always be some sort of hybrid going forward, but I'm curious to what you think, how industry is going to be aggressively adopting, or maybe slowing down with some of these experiments in different sorts of virtual communication.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look in my crystal ball. You know, there's so much benefit to the virtual engagements. I don't see it going away. I think, you know, this great experiment that we've been through the pandemic, and the way we've had to shift the way we work has taught us all so many great lessons. And I think I said towards the beginning that we've even seen the HCPs, even the guy who's digging his fax machine out of the trash, they're adopting and they're seeing the advantage. I mean, I see this more and more being our modus operandi, and that face-to-face maybe is at conferences, or maybe it's once a year you go visit, or you have a live advisory board and then you follow it on the rest of the year with the Within3 type of platform. I just really think that the uptake is going to increase because it's the future.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, so Christian, you were talking earlier about your speaker program and kind of mixing and matching like a live meeting with a virtual meeting and using both together to accomplish a goal better than just one or the other by itself. Maybe you could talk about your thoughts there. How do you see the mixing and matching of when live events are back and a part of our daily interaction with these virtual techs?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you a real world example. We had an advisory board a couple months ago now that in normal circumstances would absolutely have been live. I mean, it would have been a live event. There was probably about 10 to 15 physicians that attended it. But because of the platform, what we were able to do is we had a rather significant amount of pre-work, which was done on the platform. Questions and topics and, marketing campaigns that we were considering, and they all weighed in on that prior. We then had the meeting, which was virtual but live. I mean, outside of the platform, via Zoom and discussion and breakout groups. I mean, it was several hours long. And then at the conclusion of it, went back in to the panel, went back into the platform, and utilized the Within3 services. So it kind of sandwiched it, if you will. I mean, we had some great initial discussions, some great pre-work. The doctors came in, dialed in, ready to talk about what they just had done previously. We talked about it live, which, like I said, fast forward 6 months, will be in person. And then on the back end, it wasn't kind of a cheesy survey like, so what did you think of the meeting? I mean, it was really a nice follow-up to continue the conversation. And again, from a marketer standpoint or from a salesperson standpoint, we want to maintain those relationships. We don't want that KOL or that doctor who participated to just vanish and us never work with them again. So what this allows us to do is at the conclusion of the live meeting, continue to engage with them virtually via the platform for not only just the follow-up to that subsequent meeting, but additional meetings and additional feedback on and on and on, which is great. It's kind of that continuous, nice tether to their relationship. And we did that, a couple months ago, and it worked great.
So Nicole, on your side, so as an example, ASCO, there are certain congresses that are very, very critical to the heartbeat of oncology, at different times of the year, depending on where you are geographically. The Congress industry itself is, of course, wrestling with in-person, virtual, hybrid. Many of these same. There's other webinars going on with people from that part of the industry wrestling with what do we do with our annual meeting, and what do we do in 2022 and 2023 and so forth. But as you think about kind of making the valuable and expensive time at a live meeting better, can these technologies help, or is it kind of one or the other?
Without a doubt, Lance, and that's actually something that we've been batting around in terms of how to leverage the Within3 technology, really to have a meeting during the meeting or right after the meeting to try to get those initial insights. Because in my business, that's gold, right? New data comes out and all those big thinkers are out there expressing their opinion, and we want beyond the Twitter, we want the in-depth insights. And so if we could leverage Within3 and have a meeting with those key opinion leaders and get those insights right away and get them at their convenience. So they're either at the meeting or they're attending the virtual sessions and they're able to kind of interact through that would be golden. And I think it'd be a great way to leverage this technology for sure. And regardless of whether it's live or virtual, I think that would be a great way to do it. Yeah, something I'd like to do.
How about you, Mary? Any thoughts on that? And is there ways that virtual technology can make the live meetings that you do have that are important investments more valuable?
Yeah, I do think that. We haven't done that yet, but I'm just thinking about what Nicole said, and the idea is that, you can't be every place, all the time. And so if like in our case, we might have a working group, for example. And so if I know of my working group, who all's going to a certain Congress, could I set up a session for the people in that working group to kind of share what they're experiencing each day, what's jumping out at them, what presentation was the most impactful, or something like that can help us know what we should be exploring more. I think that's another application that I have to consider now that you've brought it up. I think it's, I don't think Congresses are going away in person, but I do think that more people with a platform like this can experience and benefit from them without necessarily physically going. You can strengthen your network of people that do go and help to share the insights faster, potentially.
Yeah, and I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to kind of ask one more question, but building on what you just said. So something else that I think, we've heard quite a bit with virtual technologies is on the internal side, the company side, folks who maybe everyone couldn't go to ASCO, but now that maybe part of ASCO is virtual, more folks can. Folks couldn't all go to the live advisory board and be the two people in the back of the room taking notes, as you were saying earlier, but maybe in this sort of environment, more people can be involved. Maybe I'll start with you, Nicole. Do you see any role for expanding on the company side access with the virtual thinking versus just the hotel sort of default thinking?
Yeah, it's a good question, Lance, and it's something that we're grappling with a little bit from a compliance perspective, right? Because advisory boards are usually like a need to know kind of thing. But the great thing, just as a backup, is even just the transcript. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be there to read the entire meeting and see every single comment. So I think either way you slice it, the platform does allow more exposure of the native content, the actual quotes, like I was saying, to everyone who might benefit from the information. So,
yeah. Christian, what about you? What about, do you think it's possibly more inclusive internally on this, or do you feel like maybe the compliance walls, as Nicole was saying, would still kind of result in some challenges there? Does it make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it really provides us nice justification to, budget holders or, your superiors to continue to have these. I mean, it's one thing to have a meeting, and on Monday morning back at the office, they say, how'd it go? And you say, it was great. A couple of good doctors and a couple of good that. But I mean, to Nicole's point, when you present them with that readout to say, how did that meeting go? And you present it, or you email it, or you disseminate it to a large group of people, it's impressive. And people say, wow, that really was a beneficial interaction, or that really was a beneficial engagement. Certainly nothing that I certainly would have been able to prepare with that level of detail, as Nicole pointed out, for the justification to do this again. The last one went really, really well. We disseminated the readout to everybody. We're thinking about doing one again this quarter. And again, it's not this big, huge, cumbersome, okay, let's find a hotel. Okay, let's get the logistics figured out. That big, huge bolus of work. It's like, okay, let's set up another discussion. Let's get another topic going. Let's get a couple more docs on the platform. It really is, frankly, easy to justify the continuous use of it.
All right. Well, I know we're about out of time. So first, I just want to say thank you to all of you. That was really interesting. I think we covered the gist of most of the questions that are on the question list that I see. If your question was not answered, certainly you can, if it's directed to Within3, you can reach us through our website. But more than happy, or LinkedIn, or any other normal means that people communicate these days. More than happy to talk further, answer any other questions, or give a demonstration or what have you. But thanks so much to the panelists. I know your worlds are also filled with Zoom calls and busy sets of things. So we really appreciate sharing these different points of view from these kind of very different size organizations and these very different even stages of the life cycle within industry. I thought it was very interesting. So thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to Allie.
Yes, thank you. That is all the time that we have for today. Thank you all for such a great session. If anyone submitted a question that wasn't addressed, please keep in mind that the speakers will reach out to you directly. This session was recorded, and you will receive a notification in 24 hours when the on-demand session is available for viewing. Before you log off, please take a moment to complete the feedback form so we can continue to improve your webinar experience. On behalf of Informa Connect and Within3, thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.